Hello and welcome back to part 2 of the Springboot Easy course, the course where I will attempt to teach the Spring Boot framework in a really easy way. Today we're going to be talking about the Spring CLI. This is going to be a relatively short video, and this is primarily due to the caveats we are soon to discuss. There we go. It's not used widely, mostly because the problems it attempts to solve for are embedded within an IDE or a plugin if you are a godlike Vim or NeoVim user. So what is it? The Spring Boot CLI is a command line tool that lets you quickly prototype with Spring. This is kind of the most important part of this video. This is essentially what it's for. It allows you to run Groovy scripts, which provides a Java-like syntax, but without much boilerplate code. It's a great way to get a Spring application off the ground quickly, especially if you don't want to use a full-fledged IDE. This scribble, as you can see here, says Spring 3.0. And the reason that this is written here is that a lot of the core utilities of the Spring CLI have been removed. Something like Spring CLI Run or Spring Install have been removed. And I think it's going to be less supported over time, as there's been less usage of the Spring CLI. If you want to use it, you can download it the way that I have, the SDK man, Java package manager here. You can either install it via SDK install Spring Boot, homebrew, you can say brew install Spring Boot. If you use Mac ports, you can say sudo port install Spring Boot CLI, or scoop for Windows. I have no idea what scoop is, and I only learned about it when I went through the docs because I am a slave to Mac OS. So what can it do? It can do some things, right? It can't do a lot of things, I would say. And as you begin to kind of use it for a lot of things, I think it defeats the purpose, and you should kind of pivot to using an IDE, right? It's really meant to, again, be used for prototyping, right? You want to test something quickly, see if it's possible. You can use the Spring Boot CLI. So you can use it to run Groovy scripts. Now, Groovy is not a language that's all that popular. I don't know how many people might have experience with Groovy. I have extensive experience with the language, but you can use it to run Groovy scripts if you so wish. You simply need to run Spring Run, and then you file name and the file extension. Again, this has gone away with Spring Boot 3, so you need to download the Spring CLI at like 2.7 in order for this to be functional. You can provide command line arguments. An example, this would be Spring Run. This would be your file name, app.groovy. And then you can provide provide some kind of args like 9000 and define which port to expose. It supports dependency management in somewhat of a unique way, right? Again, this is for prototyping, right? I don't want to define a build.gradle, load dependencies into my class path. I want something really easy and really simple to test something out. That's where you see this @grab annotation. Again, I don't know to what degree this is still supported, but essentially this is what this code might look like, right? I simply want to test an API. I want to say, okay, home, return hello world. I just want to see if this will function and how this will function, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to build out an entire Spring Boot project. I can just grab the dependency that I want, run Spring Boot run or Spring Run, and this will get up and running, and I will be able to kind of test this API locally and hit this endpoint, and hopefully I'll get this string as my response, right? So the main utility of this CLI is creating a Spring Boot project. All you need to input is Spring init, and this will generate a Spring Boot project. An example of this would be Spring init -- dependencies, and you can list your dependencies outright, and then your project name. Spring CLI also includes an embedded shell. So if you type a Spring shell, it'll run an embedded shell for you. You can execute all of the commands your heart desires. ls, cd, grep, and if you're a freak, you can use echo. So you can also download extensions. So people have contributed unique things to Spring CLI, as you would expect, and you can download the things that people thought would be nice to have. I have never gone extensively with Spring CLI, so I don't know exactly what people have built out. Download an extension that you want to have. Who knows what it could be? That sounded really rhymey. Anyhow, okay. Let's go to an example here. So let me bring up Visual Studio Code. Now, I don't use Visual Studio Code professionally, but in order to, give an example here, I'm using VS Code. So here you can see an example, right? I'm using the @grab annotation, grabbing the Spring Boot Starter Web, and I have this API at -test. So this is the path, and it's going to return test. So Groovy is dynamically typed, right? So I don't need to say like this is going to return a string, right? And let's see if this will run. So I just need to write Spring Run, Test Groovy, resolving dependencies. Okay, so I'm running into an issue with my versioning. So let's see, SDK, Springboot 2.7, there's no SDK. For 11, I like to use temp here. So let me just copy SDK, use Java 11, 10. Okay, then I simply want to make righty. And you can see our port ran on 8080. So let me just get this up and running here so I can show this. I'm going to drag this over in a second. Right, local 80. What is the dash? So I hit the API and you can see hello world as my response. So that is it, right? This is a really exciting way to get something up and running. I don't need an entire build.gradle. I don't need a whole bunch of files here, right? Really quick and really easy. However, again, this is only supported in Spring 2.7. It is not supported in Spring Boot 3. So if I quit this here, let me quit this file and then let me run the other one. So if I run Spring init, world, this is kind of the other utility that we discussed previously. I can just generate a Spring Boot project really quickly here. And you can see all of my things. This is, ignore this, this is just kind of a VS Code thing. And once we do a Gradle scan, it will be functional. Java 17 here, probably bump that up forward. I think this is 3.4, so it requires a 17 or above. So that is essentially it. These are the core utilities of Spring CLI. It's not widely used, and it's due to low adoption. It's a lot of its support is being retracted, but it's something good to know about. Yeah, that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.